我跟 Nick 在建立这个 podcast 是希望帮助你在英语沟通力 going from good to great。那但是我们在学习语言上其实蠢事也不少。那在今天比较轻松的单元中，就来跟大家分享我们学语言的旅程，还有有趣的小故事。Hello， 欢迎来到商业英语 Career Plus 的 podcast。在这边，我们利用多年国际职场与教学经验，带给大家最真实与贴切的职场英语知识。Hi, I'm Sherry, founder of Executive Plus. As a language trainer and certified coach, I've trained hundreds of managers from Fortune 500 companies such as Dior, Google, and Deloitte & Touche.
And I'm Nick, Director of Communication Strategy at Presentality. I've helped startups raise millions of US dollars in funding and trained executives of publicly listed companies to present on the global stage.
Hi everyone， 欢迎大家来到我们这第30集的 podcast。那为了要庆祝我们已经录到了30集，我们今天想来点比较轻松的 topic， 也就是跟大家分享一些我们自己在学语言上面的一些有趣的事啊，或者是糗事。因为其实学语言真的是不是那么容易的事情。So today, Nick and I are just going to share some of our stories. So, Nick, how did you learn Chinese and how was the process like?
Learning Chinese in Taiwan was quite interesting. I actually took a class for about 6 months when I first arrived, like once a week or twice a week. I don't remember. You would go for a few hours in the morning and learn Chinese. But actually I found, even though I had really great teachers, learning the language came down to more what I did outside. Because one of the complaints I always have is the person who wrote the book, I guess, didn't expect you to be in the country, or they didn't take that into account. So learning how to ask where's the bathroom was like chapter 10. And chapter 2 was how to learn numbers in negotiating the price of a car. So I don't know in what world a language learner needs to know how to negotiate the price of a car before they ask the basics of where is the bathroom? Well, what about you, Sherry? You studied abroad, but you didn't grow up abroad per se. So where did your English language or language learning journey begin?
所以其实我是在台湾出生的，那在台湾也一直到了14岁的时候，所以我是普通的国民小学，也是普通的国中。那我大概是在国中的一二年级的时候就出国了，但是因为其实之前等于说也是要靠一些就是课外的时间来加强英语。那我很幸运的时候，那个时候其實我媽媽她就是一個教外國人說中文的華語老師， so 她的 resource 非常的多。 So I'm constantly I have a lot of really great relationships with a lot of her students.So, they hang around in our house, a few times a year for holiday. And so I'm kind of used to that environment. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, environment always factors a lot into that.
Yeah.
Actually, the first 5 years I was in Taiwan, I lived in Jiayi. And I attribute a lot of my speed of learning Chinese to living there. Because I know foreigners who live in major cities like Taichung, Taipei, Kaohsiung, who have lived here for like 10 to 20 years and cannot speak any Chinese to save their life.
Yeah, they don't need to.
Because they don't need to.
Yeah.
But when living in Jiayi, unless you only want to eat in 5 different restaurants who happen to have English menus.
McDonald's?
Yeah, exactly. Or you don't want to go anywhere, like that's it. That's your only option. You have to pick up the language. And funny enough is even going to McDonald's, the way that I really learned my numbers well was because I could go into McDonald's and order meals based on number.
1號餐
Yeah, exactly. So this is, that was my practice, was going into McDonald's and being like, oh, yeah, son, how son. And then having to learn the different, like Coke was easy, but Sprite and other drink names or other specialty items names, that's kind of how I picked it up.
Yeah. So I mean for me, 我觉得学英文对我来讲是比较容易，因为其实我从非常小就开始，而且我有那样子的 environment。但是呢，我到了高中的时候在加拿大，我开始觉得我也要来学学别的语言。So that's when I picked up Spanish.
And how's that going? Because I've heard that someone had a teen idol crush. And that's the entire reason that she learned Spanish.
Yes, 我有非常强烈的 motivation， 就是当时我真的超喜欢 Ricky Martin 的。那你如果跟我年纪差不多，你应该记得那个时候他最红的时候。So he was my motivation. I wanted to learn Spanish because I want to speak to him. 那你会想说，你疯了，你怎么可能会有机会跟他讲到话呢？ You know what?I had my chance.
And how did that go?
Okay, so I remember it was like a Channel V. Again, 如果你跟我年纪差不多，你会记得 Channel V. 那个时候 Ricky Martin 来台湾做一个 tour. 然后我赢了一个 lucky draw 还怎么样 So I get to like meet him. So like a meet and greet kind of situation. And I met him. I was like the second one. 我排在第二个哦。So it's so incredibly cool. And I walk up to him. 然后那个时候已经学大概1年多的 Spanish. 结果我看到他，我整个就 froze. All I could say is, Hi, my name is Sherry. 全部都是英文讲。That was it.
So after all this time of learning Spanish and wanting to go talk to him, you just froze up and used English.
I froze, man. 所以我非常了解很多学生说我就是会呆掉啊，看到外国人就是突然间就不知道该说什么呀。Same boat. Same thing for me. 所以那我觉得其实学 Spanish, to me, the hardest thing is the R sounds. Do you know that? The roll your tongue?
Right.
Yeah. 所以我完全不知道该怎么 roll the tongue. 我可以 roll the tongue, 但是不是在讲那个语言的时候 So basically, without knowing how to do it, it's kind of useless.
And people just don't understand.
Yeah, I'm useless because it doesn't sound like Spanish. It sounds like Japanese when I speak Spanish.
Yeah, I run into the same issue trying to learn Taiwanese. Like, again, living in Chiayi, I always wanted to learn Taiwanese because I find in the South, actually most people on a daily will just converse in Taiwanese. But I can't create the accent. Like, it's far more like throaty and nasally, and I cannot create that accent.
Throaty and nasally.
But I can't create that, like, no matter what I do. So it just comes out really weird. Like, I sound like an impression of someone in Taipei who can't speak Taiwanese trying to speak Taiwanese.
You mean like me?
Yeah, so it's like a bad impression of, and it just comes across terrible. Like, I just can't do it.
Yeah, and I know that Taiwanese has a lot of more tones than Mandarin.
Right.
Like way more tones.
Like 7 tones or something?
7 or 8, I think. Oh my God. People would be like, oh my God, you guys.
You have no authority to speak.
好了，我不敢乱讲。Yeah, and then 在大学的时候，我又学了日文。So, and I took... Actually, I would say 2 years of Japanese. Yeah, well, maybe 1 or 2 years of Japanese. And I even took the standard tests. 那个时候有3级的考试，我还考到了就是最初阶的。现在好像有4级了，但是当初是有最初阶的。So, you know, I thought I was cool enough to get a job in Japan. So I went to this career fair that they hosted in Boston at the time. And it was like an annual career fair where all the Japanese company or all the Japanese branches would go to Boston and they would recruit. So I went there with like my Japanese resume, thinking that I am so cool. I'm like trilingual. And again, I looked at the interviewer, I'm like blanked. Just like, he goes, in Japanese, he's like, 你不会讲日文，你要找什么工作? So all I was like, oh, すみません. And I ran away.
Gotta go.
So yeah, not entirely professional, but definitely 要练习那种情况，真的是 interview 的情况，你一定要常练习。就是普通你平常会讲的这种语言，那种 conversational 的。一点用都没有，因为在 professional environment 是完全不一样的。
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to pressure, right? The moment that you have pressure, language becomes a bit more difficult, which is why Back when, like very early when I came to Taiwan, I was talking to someone who's an IELTS examiner. And he looked at me and he goes, the greatest piece of advice that I would like to give students, but I'm not allowed to, is drink a beer before you show up to your exam.
I heard about that, the fact that some people when they're a little bit tipsy, it's really where their language ability.
And I've seen that over and over again, where I'll see foreigners who go to a bar, drink a little bit, and that's the first time their Chinese comes out. Or again, Taiwanese, they'll go to a bar, and that's when the fluent English comes out.
Is it because it lowers their inhibition?
And that's part of it, or it's just like, again, you don't care anymore about whether you're grammatically correct or that's the right word or being about embarrassed. So, no, I'm not advocating everyone becoming an alcoholic, but it is one of those times where it's, having less thought process about language usually has it come out a lot better, right?
So what about you, Nick? I share my embarrassing stories. What about your embarrassing story?
I can't think of a very specific embarrassing story, but there's a lot of moments where my Chinese gets weird. So you talked about environment, right? Your mom was a Chinese teacher for foreigners, and so you grew up around. And same as, even though I took Chinese classes, I would say that most of my Chinese, and it's easy to see that spoken and listening and reading to a degree, I'm okay. I can't write to save my life. And that's because a lot of my Chinese education just came from talking to people over and over. So there's a lot of instances where I have heard words, but I've never seen them written down. I have no idea what the character looks like. But, back to the environment pieces. When I first came to Taiwan, I was teaching courses for nurses who wanted to go abroad to work. And so most of the time where I would hear Chinese is a lot of nurses speaking Chinese, which means that my tone of voice in English and my tone of voice in Chinese are completely different.
Meaning 很女生.
Yeah. 很娘. Usually when I speak Chinese, because I, basically learned from a bunch of people who'd be like, 对啊,是哦,好啊. And, when I speak Chinese, I picked up those kind of nuances. 谢谢哦. And so when people listen to me speak Chinese, they're like, who are you? Because I'm far more polite. I'm a lot more gentle in Chinese. And so when I want to make a really strong authoritative point, I either have to think about it really hard in Chinese, be like, be manly in Chinese, or I just have to say it in English because it just comes across 很娘.
其实我之前也是因为这个 topic， 所以我们在想说要怎么样让尼克的中文稍微比较 man 一点。如果大家有什么建议的话，
Yeah, I get laughed at all the time even when I'll pay parking to an attendant.
Yeah.
Like, 谢谢哦.
You're so nice and gentle. Even I feel more manly when I speak in Chinese.
谢谢.
Oh, so funny. Didn't you say when you came to Taiwan, you thought that like going to wash your hands or something like that?
Again, this goes back to because Chinese is a language that comes down to tone, or just as a foreigner learning the language, and you guys have this in English, where some words sound the same.
Yeah.
And so my Chinese teacher would try and, do the immersion thing. So even though we're beginning learners, certain terms or words she would just repeat all the time. And one of the words would just be, take a break, like 休息吧. But we were also at the same time learning terms like go wash your hands. And for the longest time, these two phrases were exactly the same thing in my head. And so I just didn't understand. I'm like, why in Chinese would to take a break be to wash your hands? Like, is that what, is that just a cultural thing?
It's
where you're
very
like,
hygienic.
Yeah, we're very hygienic. Like, I got to take a break, so I'm going to go wash my hands.
洗手跟休息.
Yeah.
It's like in reverse in a way.
It's in reverse, and so it just throws me off because I'm just like, logically, fine. I guess it's a cultural thing. I don't get it. Until I finally had to ask someone one day, like, what are they talking about? Like, why is this? And they're like, no. 洗手, 休息. These are two different things. You're like, yeah, okay. That makes so much more sense.
So I guess a word of advice, practice, and when in doubt, ask the question.
Yeah, and anytime you're learning a language, we have our other podcast, English Cappuccino, where we talk about word usage. Just asking words. A lot of what I learned in Chinese early on is I really liked certain Chinese singers. So one would be Joanna Wong. The other would be Khalid Fang.
Who are they? 你在说谁？
I know these are not like...
Joanna Wang 谁？
是王若琳。
王若琳。
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm not choosing like the top Chinese singing celebrities.
Again,
whatever.
you know our age now very well.
But there would be words that I would just hear all the time from their music, and I would just listen to them, and I would literally just ask someone, like, what does that mean? Like, I hear the refrain over and over again, and it's just like, what does that mean? What's going on there? And that's how I would learn Chinese songs and more vocabulary.
Yeah.
But if I was embarrassed, I'm like, oh, I don't really understand the rest. There's no way.
Yeah, 因为我觉得用字的这种 context 是不同情况，到底它是正面还是负面，还是它在什么状况它可能是正面或者是负面，我觉得这种东西都是要用跟去询问你才会知道，你才会去了解它那个意义在哪里，或者你到底要在什么时间去用这个字才对。所以我希望大家从我们的 mistakes 或者我们的经验，大家也能够去多多练习，然后呢，如果有机会的话，能到我们英语卡布 English Cappuccino 那个另外一个 podcast 去学习不同的字汇，然后从中你也会了解说该怎么样运用这些字汇。
So we really hope that you enjoyed this. Again, even though we are here to talk about professional business language, we've all been there. We've made our mistakes.
Yep.
We've had our really weird stories using language. And we all start from the same place. So don't worry about it. Put the language, the key lesson is just put the language to use. Drink a beer if you have to, and then go do it. And everything will slowly catch up and come into itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk to you guys next time. Bye. 如果你喜欢我们的 podcast， 欢迎来追踪我们的主管英文 Executive Plus 的 Facebook。那也可以写信到我们的信箱 yourcareerplus@gmail.com。